I have 4 kids ranging from 17 to 27, and none of them would answer anything that looked like a pre-1990 question. And I think that that's the thing, is that we as marketers have become so reliant on the trend data. We are really hesitant to disrupt it with a different question.
Welcome to the Marketing Expedition Podcast, an auditory journey through the latest in marketing, branding, and advertising. Now, here's your Marketing Expedition guide, Ray Allen.
On this week's episode of the Marketing Expedition Podcast, I get to speak with Peter Shafer, and he's the Vice President of Sales and Marketing at Everest Communications. Everest is a digital communications firm that provides counsel and program execution support to companies in the areas of analytics, social media strategy, digital reputation repair. And having worked for prestigious polling organizations such as Gallup and Harris, as well as large global PR firms, Peter is the ideal person to shed light on how using data effectively can vastly improve your digital marketing campaigns. So let's talk with Peter, but first, let's go over the marketing essentials moments, the basics that you need to help you build your brand and your bottom line. In this week's topic, I want to cover speaking to sell, to be able to share your expertise. And then when you share your expertise and you share your value to your audience, it allows you to become the expert and people want to buy from you. So here's some tips in helping you in this marketing journey through speaking or presenting that have worked for me and could work for you. So first things first, know who your audience is going to be. Find out a little bit more about them. What is it that they're really most interested in hearing from you? And ask those questions even before you present to them. What do you want to know most about, whatever the topic is that you're going to be presenting on? And then number 2, practice and prepare for your audience. Be able to have your presentations ready to go. Make sure that you're there ahead of time to be able to have everything all set up so you don't have any tech problems or anything like that. And then of course, practice. Practice makes progress, right? Number 3, share what your audience is going to learn from you. Tell them, then show them, share, and be sure to do what you say you're going to do. Up front, they want to know what they're going to learn from you. So go ahead and share all that it is that you're going to cover and how much time you're going to take to do it. And that way they're prepared and then aren't surprised and are also understanding what you are going to do. And number 4, ask for audience participation. Engage them, ask those questions, and allow them to converse with you. Of course, give them a time frame to stick to and say something like, in 30 seconds, can you tell me your answer to your whatever it is that you're saying, right? And that way they're not going to ramble on forever and take all of your time away, right? But having that two-way communication street really helps engage them and keeps them engaged. And if they know that they're going to be asked questions, then they might want to pay attention so that they're not called upon and have deer in the headlight look to be able to do that. So, and then of course, redirect if somebody is needing to take a long time to explain what it is. You can have a conversation with them after your presentation and share with them, oh, this seems like a conversation that we can have afterwards and I can dig into it a little bit further, or maybe we can meet up and do that. And that way, again, they're not taking all of your precious time that you have on stage away from you. Number 5. Personalize your presentation, tell stories, share some examples or case studies, exemplify your expertise, and share all of those experiences that you've had before, and that will help to showcase what it is that you know. And number 6, tonality and personality, projecting your voice, using humor when it's appropriate, those pregnant pauses for additional added effect, and then repeat a quotable moment to emphasize a critical point. Repeat a critical moment, right? Repeat that so that people can let it absorb and sink in and even tweet about it, right? They'll quote you and they'll tweet it out there using your hashtag that you share and supply, right? Fluctuate your voice. Vibrato when you're excited and passionate about the topic, and then maybe just the opposite when you want to evoke emotion and have empathy and compassion, right? So just thinking about how you can use your tone of voice and your personality to really make sure that they are grasping what you're wanting to share with them. Number 7, don't read from your slides. Follow an outline, but don't read from those slides. Make sure that your slides only have about 5 words or phrases or less. They're there to be a visual aid to support what you're saying. it will really distract your audience if they're just trying to read everything that you have on a slide. You're not there to read a novel, right? You're not there to just read off your slides. And when people have to read the slides and they're not actually actively listening to you and what you have to say. So remember, the slides are there just as a visual aid to help you in being able to continue on with your topics and having that outline to follow. So that way you're not having just a canned presentation. You're more authentic when you can tell those stories and share, right? Number 8, close with a dynamic and memorable ending. Some sort of call to action or whatever the next steps that you want your audience to take away from your presentation. And then, of course, how they can follow up with you and your team or your cause or whatever it is that you want them to do. But answer what is next for them and why. And then you can use things like QR codes, surveys, handouts, and then plan to stay after your presentation to meet and greet and get appointments set. To use a booking calendar is so helpful because you can make it quick and easy. I actually have a QR code on the back of my business card that links directly to my booking calendar so people can get 15-minute time slots with me on one-on-one, and then we can see if there's more that we can do for them in the future. And number 10, remember, practice makes progress. My grandma used to say practice makes perfect, but I'm saying practice makes progress. And if you want more additional information or help or ideas that I can help you with in your presentation, feel free to reach out to me. You can go to peppershock.com/Ray-book to book time with me. And Ray is spelled RHEA. So peppershock.com/Ray-book and get your 15 minutes on my calendar, and we can talk about how we can do things like this for you and with you to support you in your presentation to speak to sell. And now it's time to get into our interview. Let's go. Welcome to the Marketing Expedition podcast. I'm your host, Ray Allen. I'm the president and CEO of Peppershock Media and the founder of the Marketing Expedition community. And today's guest, we have Peter Shafer with us. Welcome, Peter.
Hi, Ray. How you doing? Great to be with you today.
Thank you. Thank you. Hey, and you're calling from Baltimore today.
I am.
Excellent.
Yes.
Excellent. So East Coast, West Coast kind of thing going on here.
Yes. I think we've covered the continent now, so that's good.
We're good. And really, we wanted to talk to you more about data analysis and collection, and then getting into what you're going to do with it once you've collected it. So just share a little bit. And of course, why don't you first start off giving us a little bit of your background, kind of how you got into this and why this is so fascinating to you, and what gives you the right to be able to talk about all of this, Peter.
Well, I will try to maybe justify the right to be able to do that. But across my career, I've actually had two specific career paths. One has been in public polling and market research, where it's a lot of data collection and then using that data for consumer insights, or even things like political elections and those types of uses of data. And then the second part has been on the communication side, and that has been the coupling of how do you communicate about the data that you collect and the insights that you find, but also how you get media to cover those, and then what it means to have it publicly available out there in regard to how it's being used, where it's being placed, how people are making decisions off of it, those types of things. So I've worked on, some political campaigns where the data is, used to test advertising, messaging. Now I'm in the digital space more, so it's a whole different level of data because of the amount of internet traffic and amount of social media traffic. So, quite frankly, my passion about it is just being curious about how consumers and how all different types of audiences change and transform seemingly on a daily basis, or about their impressions about what's going on, or how they share their feelings or emotions or even their opinions about what's going on. So, I like that nexus point between what that data is, or how that data is collected, and then what that data means, and then how to communicate that data.
Wow. Yeah, I think you've done a good job of qualifying yourself. Good job. So yeah, I mean, let's dig in a little bit more in kind of the ways that people can collect what they need in order to make those decisions in their marketing, right? And you're right, the digital space is just, there's an exuberant amount of ways to collect data and then just being able to analyze it. So tell me more about kind of some ways that you've used in the past that have been really successful in being able to collect what people need.
Yeah, it's a great question, Ray. And I think you just touched on something that I don't think marketers and I don't think even data professionals appreciate. And that is just the sheer, absolute crazy amount of data that's out there already. And that the real puzzle right now is piecing together these different data points and data sets that you collect, whether it's from social media sources, whether it's from internet traffic, whether it's from polling, research, whatever it is, and piecing it together into a mechanism that you can then interpret the data on. So right now, for example, the three primary ways companies are collecting data. One is, traditional market research, where they're going out to different audiences, asking questions, taking the answers to those questions, turning it into data, and then putting those data points together into either a marketing plan, a sales plan, whatever it would be, new pricing options. The second way is really unstructured data, and they're about probably 80% of the world's data is unstructured, where it's just kind of all over the place, and it's coming in from transactional data. Or commentary that's collected off of websites or off of social media. So if you post something on Instagram about your favorite brand, that technically is unstructured data, because you then have to structure it in once you get it to fit into your model. And then the third is the hard statistics that do come from all the different platforms that are either being used or monitored or things like that. So those things would be categorized like, how many likes you have on Facebook, or how many, posts on LinkedIn, or how many, likes on, various websites. So each one of these sets of data, those are the main primary data sets that most companies, regardless of how big or how small, use on a pretty daily basis. Again, the issue has been how to put those together and how to actually decide who is going to put those together. Because what I found in many, many companies, and especially larger organizations, is that different departments own different types of data. And there is not as much data sharing across those departments as one would maybe imagine. So in fact, I was talking about this with a group of university presidents a couple months ago, is that, when you've got admissions data over here and you've got alumni data over here and you've got financial data over here and whatever, those groups have to come together to talk, or at least come up with some plan to share that data, and that doesn't happen. So oftentimes decisions are made in vacuums or silos because of that. And I think that's the biggest struggle, is just who owns the data internally, how that data gets shared, and then what purpose maybe the IT department serves in both protecting that data, but also making that data available on demand for other groups.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, because, I just see a world of spreadsheets everywhere, or, other tools that people use to understand and collect it. But then if you're not sharing it and you don't have the information that other departments do, then how do you use that to your advantage if you don't have access to it or don't realize that they even are collecting something that could be useful to you? And I can see how that could really inhibit people from being able to do what they need to do.
Well, and one of the simple ways, Ray, that companies are trying to make this work is that the great part of technology is that it's been able to automate transactional information. So if you're a retail store, or there's just gobs and gobs of data that you can get off just a single transaction. If you marry that with then customer sentiment or information from market research that you're collecting, it becomes a very, very powerful data set in regard to making decisions on pricing, on promotions, on different marketing aspects. And oftentimes that by the time that those two things come together, opportunities can either be missed, or opportunities for making and improving customer loyalty are missed. And that's I think the part that is both exciting but also exasperating to people, is that they can see that would be a great use of it, but they're exasperated to trying to get it together. So
yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit more about customer sentiment, because I think that is sort of the answer to being able to say, well, I don't know, if my marketing is working or if my branding is doing any good, right? And sentiment scoring, let's dig into that a little bit more, because I think that
Sure.
could be something useful to our audience to understand how it works, how you go about it, what you can track, how you can track it. Share a little more about sentiment scoring.
Yeah, and that's a great question, Ray. Two things. One is that I think if you would talk to a lot of market researchers and data scientists, that the idea of sentiment is almost a holy grail. Is that if we could really measure that accurately, we would be on to something really just absolutely terrific. There are different types of ways to measure sentiment that people are experimenting with, but again, one of the difficulties with sentiment data is that it is oftentimes unstructured. And so it takes a little bit of time to structure it. But, and by the time you get it structured, it might already be out of date. One of the things that I know, back 10 years ago when the word cloud came out, that was, kind of brilliant in regards to, sentiment. And even today, it's still a very usable and certainly a valuable tool for
I love word clouds. Absolutely.
Yeah.
The
next level, I think, in at least what I'm seeing in terms of the metrics, is a consistency around some of those sentiments and now building data sets and databases around those particular sentiments. So for example, if there could be a complete data set around satisfaction. There could be a complete data set around loyalty. There could be, around engagement. So these keywords and terms, now that there's enough data to start really allowing for these models to be built, that's where sentiment is starting to play an even bigger role. And so the modeling is based on all this data, and quite frankly, the modeling is fairly new, and it's still being, kind of ironed out, but a lot of the modeling and the algorithms that are based or that are part of that modeling are getting much more accurate. The other part too, and we talked about this earlier in terms of data collection, the ability to collect that data is much easier now than it was even 5 years ago. And in fact, you've got a situation where consumers are volunteering that data versus being asked that data. And that has become, I think, the real challenge for many of the marketing people and the people that work with the data, is really trying to figure out how much unsolicited data we want, and then how much solicited data we want in that sentiment.
Mm-hmm.
I know, for example, that many companies have online communities where they have certain sets of customers in those data sets, and they use that group, that community, as a way to really get deeper into sentiment, so they can take the kind of more general population data and bring it up to what they would consider whoever there is in that community, and usually that's really loyal and highly engaged customers, and test out those pieces of data using the sentiment from that group of, say, 2,500 or 5,000, or even a less than 1,000. I worked on one that was 1,000 moms who bought a particular brand, and the response rates were really, I mean, it was 70 to 80% on almost every project. So you've got this really well-defined audience, and they know and understand your product, and so that sentiment, it becomes a very valuable tool. The other thing too is that the sentiment measures are getting more easily connected, if I could, so when you look at sentiment, there's almost a laddering or a pyramid of, questions that you can get to that will lead you to an ultimate sentiment. And I think that the more and more the modeling is based on that, is, okay, here's the baseline sentiment, here's that next level sentiment, here's that third level. And it's that third level that it really addresses, that emotional need versus just that basic need.
Right. And I think that it's definitely going beyond just on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely would you be to refer us again? Or, there's so much more to it now, and using those words and having the ability to have first party data as opposed to third party, which third party data is so hard to come by. And, you've got all these rules and cookie rules and all the things. And so it's hard to get that now. So if you get first party data coming directly from the consumer, then it's more valuable, right?
Absolutely. And I think you realize this, or you just touched on it there for a second, is that I don't think companies really woke up to the idea of how important their first party data was until about 5 or 6 years ago. And they're like, oh, hey, this is, and I think to your point, because of the availability of third party data, that was the default posture 5 or 6 years ago. Now it's, I think, especially with the first party data that's available to most of the companies out there, is that let's work through our first party data first. Let's see even if we can get second party data, but that third party data is more either a support mechanism or it helps us interpret where we stand in the bigger environment.
Right. And I have seen more and more where just even simple surveys get dismissed. They get lost in an inbox, and it's harder now to sometimes get that information, get your customers to do a survey, right? And so you have to come up with ways.
Well, so this is the math is probably old now, but back in I used to work for Gallup poll, and back in the day they could get one out of 6 phone calls would lead to a completed survey, which meant poll. So you would have to make 6,000 phone calls to get 1,000 responses. Now that number is really, really high, and it's not as easy. About 45% of all surveys are completed on a mobile device now. So there's even a bias towards the survey questions that are so long. If I'm looking on my mobile device and I see that it's a long question, I'm just going to disconnect and go, regardless of whether I'm a loyal employee or not. The third is that we're still asking the questions that we were using in the 1990s for the 2020s. And quite frankly, I have 4 kids ranging from 17 to 27, and none of them would answer anything that looked like a pre-1990 question. And I think that that's the thing, is that we as marketers have become so reliant on the trend data. We are really hesitant to disrupt it with a different question. I remember we were talking about this a couple of years ago when I was working for another polling company, and there was some statistical data that said I statements were better than questions, because if you have to answer, I will do this, or I am loyal to X or whatever, it brings a different level of ownership versus, you here, at a scale of 1 to 10, how loyal are you? And so I think there hopefully is a shift now towards asking better questions that do 2 particular things. One is make it a lot easier for people to answer, and also to look on a phone and be able to say, yeah, I can do this really quickly. The second is that it will actually reveal what the sentiment is versus some numerical representation of that sentiment. Because I think, we used to joke about this in polling, is that if you ask anybody how their marriage is or how their partnership is, you're always going to get a 5. It's if you answer the 4 that your spouse goes crazy or your partner goes crazy, and it's like, why did you give me a 5? And I think, I think that sometimes the scaling just doesn't match the intensity of the sentiment. And that's the part that I think is getting better and better. But again, to your point, when you're looking on a mobile device, or you get this survey that's 15 minutes, it's just like I'm sorry, I'm out at 8 and I'm done. But I will say 2 things about the survey part that I think are things are getting better. Number one is I think that people are responding a lot better to specific brand asks about a particular situation. So for example, if I get something about Gatorade, for example, and I that's a drink that might be some, I might be more apt to answer that. Or if I get an invitation from, another retail brand that I shop at, if I get something that's a little bit vague or a little bit less, obvious, I'm probably less likely to do it. And I think that some of the rules around the blinding of those surveys are changing so that, there's really not that much bias if you call me and say, hey, can you do a survey on Gatorade, for example. It doesn't signal that, that there's any inherent bias in that selection.
Well, that's a good point, because people might be more willing to do a survey if it's something that they are passionate about or believe, or they're familiar with, or it's something they've heard of. But if it's never anything that they've heard of, why would they bother? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Or to your point, and I think it's a good one, Ray, is that sometimes when you read the survey invitations, or the survey invitation pops into your inbox, it's the ambiguity of it is enough to make you kind of toss it aside.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. Benchmark One is an email marketing automation and CRM software that saves you time. It has drip campaigns, autoresponders, built-in email marketing tools, landing pages, pop-ups that help you really create that stellar buying experience with your customers. You can really simplify and get back to doing what you do best, running your own business. So email marketing is not a new concept, but if you haven't found one that works for you, give Benchmark One a try. Go to peppershock.com/offers and select the link there. So tell me about a time that you've helped a client through this process that you're talking about. Like, give me an example of something that you've done with a company before to kind of take them through this whole process, and what were the results?
Sure. I've worked on a number of different projects with different organizations and groups over time. One of them that just sticks out to me is recently I worked on an advertising campaign, and the advertising campaign had two very specific targets. And so we were able to do some research up front about the two particular targets, and where in the U.S. population they were clustered, or at least where they were. And so we did the research, kind of more secondary research than primary research, around where they were. The primary research was, could we get enough people within these two audience groups to participate? We did a really, really quick couple question poll just to see, do a kind of a finger into the wind, as they say.
Yeah.
We found out, two particular things. One was that both of the audiences had above average response rates, even to the survey questions. We thought that, they might be, because they were harder targets to reach, that they would be a little bit more reticent to participate. Mm-hmm. And that was not true. So that was good. The second is, one of the questions we asked them in the poll was, what was the best way to reach them? And we gave them a number of media channels that they were particularly using. And so they fed us the information, and we found out that there were also a couple other platforms that they were spending some time on that we hadn't considered. And then we tested just a quick blurb about what the campaign was going to be, and got a fairly positive response that would resonate with me, or whatever. We ran the internet, or I'm sorry, we ran the Facebook ad, and we ran the YouTube ad in 6 markets. And in less than 35 days, we got 16 million impressions and 8 million video completes.
Wow.
And we were very happy about that. And there were a couple things that the research revealed to us that I hadn't mentioned earlier. One of the things that the research revealed to us was that 15 seconds was the absolute maximum that we would have time with, somebody watching the video. So we knew that we had to do something within that 15 seconds. And that helped us not only streamline the message, but also get right to the point on that. And I think that helped in terms of
capture their attention right away. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It really, really helped, I think, with video completion. And to be very candid about it, the fact that we got a 50% video completion rate was a little shocking to us, because that was a little bit, we were expecting, lower, and had conditioned our client to that. The second one of the other insights that we found out from the research was, we knew where if they weren't watching or completing the video, where they were terminating, and that data helped us. And we knew that, for example, most of the people were terminating at about 8 seconds. So we knew that at least up front, the message, the first part of the message was seen. And that helped us, at least say, okay, so even having that ability to measure, when somebody terminated from the ad. But it was, for us, it was great to see the numbers hold steady through the entire 35 days of the campaign across the different states. We would see a little bit of movement here or there, but nothing major. But it was great that we had the polling data up front, with the two audiences to at least get the litmus test to say, okay, I think we're on to something here. And so the campaign, basically, we finished up at the end of August, right before Labor Day. The campaign ran, from about the end of July through the end of August. And the initial research we had done was just right at the end of June. So
and even summer months, right?
Yeah,
even the summer months. I mean, that was good. That was really good because
exactly.
Summer,
and
people are camping and whatever, right? Vacationing. That's great.
And well, we had this joke that in one of the states it was very it's a lot of resorts, and we said it must have rained that day because we saw a jump in the traffic. That people were on the beach or something.
That'd be something to test to see. Like, go back in the almanac and see if it did.
Exactly.
But interesting.
But to your point, Ray, I think you can never underestimate just something as simple as that, or something as simple as an event that was happening at a particular time. We knew that in August in particular, we had 2 of the 6 states had state fairs. So we knew that, we could have had a bump because of, some of the geofencing that was in part of it. But generally, the fact that we got 16 million impressions and 8 million, but we used that initial market research to help craft that. I think really it was a good combination of, quantitative, and then on the back end here, quantitative plus qualitative data. So
right. And then you can make your decisions based on what you gathered. And then it's, then you're not just wasting money in hopes that something might work, right?
Right, exactly. And it's interesting. And that's one of the words that keeps coming into the, I guess, nomenclature of even the data collection people, is that there is eco waste in having these, impressions that go nowhere.
Right.
And you think about it, and obviously with the ability to target and all the different metrics that are coming out from the different platforms, one of the things that I'm beginning to fear, at least, is that we have so much data that we are defaulting to efficiency versus effectiveness. Mm-hmm. And that we may have hit our target, we may have done this, but do we actually have that next level result? Did we get the action that we needed to come from it? And I think that sometimes the science or the data science is ahead of where we are in regard to both our ability to make decisions, but also our ability to interpret the data. And so we're behind, so we'll default to the behind position versus maybe experimenting with the future position.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about some of the tools and technology that you now have access to, that you use in helping collect and then interpret. I think every marketer out there is trying to find the best tool for the best thing, and I'm just curious, what are some of the resources and tools that you use on a regular?
It's an excellent question, Ray. And I think if I were in, the position of one of your listeners, I would kind of just get on a whiteboard and just draw like big buckets of data. So for example, there's a lot of secondary data out there that's really interesting. So for example, a company called NetBase Quid, and you've got Khoros, and you've got, all these different social media monitoring tools that are very, very good. Some of them are stronger in certain areas than others, but there are some really good data collectors and data aggregators out there, and I think it's just really deciding what it is you want to what you need from that. The second part of it is how that data gets reported, and some of the secondary data doesn't necessarily get into those data visualization tools. And so sometimes, you have to buy or get a license for a data visualization, which basically takes the data and puts it into dashboards and things along those lines. So that's kind of the second step of it. From a research and polling perspective, there are so many different software packages out there now that allow you to do it yourself. That ranges from, companies like SurveyMonkey all the way down to other smaller companies that are even very focused in on a particular industry group, and have been able to create a market for a particular, say, industry group or a particular set of titles, and then be able to research with those titles. So IT decision makers, for example. But those DIY tools are plentiful. They're out there. They're getting better all the time. What is not getting better in that, though, is how people ask questions. And also sometimes there's an issue with the same people taking surveys over and over and over. Is there a bias because somebody's in there? And then, of course, the market research industry went through just 2 years of incredible growth because of COVID, because everything kind of shifted and you had to figure that out. So a lot of the larger market research companies have acquired smaller research companies. So there's kind of now this middle gap where there's the big guys and a lot of big guys, and then there's a lot of small guys, but there're not a lot of middle tier in between. And oftentimes, that's the middle tier is where some of the fun happens. So, from that standpoint, and then you've got this, the Google Analytics and the Facebook meta reporting, and each of the platforms that you are able to use have packages that go along with the data collection so that you can tap into it. So those are probably the big 5 silos that most marketing people are coming over. And then you've got the actual marketing tools themselves that help do measure website traffic and who's registering for this and that. So you've got that other bucket over there, and that is evolving as well. So I think all boats are rising at the same time, and maybe not as evenly as we would hope. But I think what I see as the big gap right now is not necessarily in the data collection itself. It's in the ability to learn how to do the data interpretation, and how to begin to assign more accurate values to the data that you're getting, and not, for example, either projecting something onto the data or creating a narrative around the data that fits something that already exists. I think sometimes we try to we create the narrative first and then go try to find the statistics to support it versus doing the research first and then building the narrative out of that.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we'll wrap up here, but a couple more questions for you.
Sure,
I also have a lot of students that listen to our podcast, so I always like to kind of dig in a little bit. What advice would you give to a student that's going to graduate maybe this coming year, next year, getting into this kind of industry? What would you tell them?
That's a great question, and I would tell them 3 particular things. One is that there is a very, very big but unadvertised need for data analysts and data scientists and people that can actually work with data sets. And one of the bad things about the job market is, or one, I shouldn't say the job market, about some of the job descriptions is that they make it sound like you need a PhD in data science when you actually really don't. So if you're comfortable and can work with data, my advice would be to at least apply for those that they might sound maybe a little above by a level or 2, but don't be afraid to apply, because I think that the data skills they're in such demand. The second is that on your resume and especially on LinkedIn, make sure that you use words like, data analyst and data science and data, that really kind of signal that that's the way to go. Market research even, and I think that there are some good, keywords that really help. Polling happens to be one of them if that's the route you want to go. But it gets you into a different ecosystem in regard to that. The third is that in most of the market research firms, especially I would say the top 50, are always looking for entry-level people to come in and start and to work with data. So I don't think it's going to be a huge difficulty finding open positions, especially in the market research area, if that's the way you want to go. If you want to go to, more into corporate, that's a little bit more dicey, only because I think that the job descriptions are a little vaguer in regard to some of the specific data roles that you might have. The last piece of advice I would give is that if you can have a one or two or a couple case studies that you can at least show how you worked with data in a way that was constructive and that led to a decision. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do A to Z, but it does mean that you actually were participating in it, because I can tell you that alone is going to make people stand out, because it's such a practical and necessary skill for either side, whether it's on the data analysis side or whether it's on the data collection side. So anything that you've done, please, just promote it as much as you can, because it does make sense, or it does help. Even if it was an internship working with, a company where you were working on data sets and things, those things are invaluable. And I think if it does nothing, at least it gets conversations started in places that you might not have imagined before.
Right, right. And where do you get current resources, information? Do you belong to some associations? Maybe share a little bit about, just industry, where that all comes from for you to stay on top of everything.
Yeah, from an association standpoint, I follow a couple, but I don't necessarily belong to many. And when it was actually in the market research and polling industry, it was a little bit more intense, because you had to have some level of accreditation. But where I find a lot of information is the different groups on LinkedIn, the professional groups on LinkedIn. And there's, there are a lot of really good, I guess, quasi associations on there where there's a lot of good information. I happen to be a newsletter junkie. So, for example, I probably get 20 newsletters in my inbox, and some of them range from e-consultancy to American Marketing Association and a lot of them have, great free newsletters. There's several that I pay for as well to get the premium content. But I find that there's a lot of self-learning or tools for self-learning like that are available and then, even at just attending interesting webinars on particular things that are relevant. There, one of the trends, obviously, and I'm sure you get hundreds of these, is we'll send you an Uber Eats lunch coupon, and please join us this. And a lot of those are very, very interesting to listen to. And if for nothing else, just to kind of confirm that you're on the right track, or at least see some things. But one of the things I prefer is the self-learning side of, whether it's Coursera or whether it's LinkedIn Learning or one of the other platforms, because it allows me to go at a different pace. But I find those very, very valuable, because you can refer back to them. And usually there's a robust enough set of information to do. One last thing that I would also recommend, and a lot of the business schools and MBA programs have websites where they put out free content, and they do webinars and things for free. And those tend to be good trend topic areas to look at. Some of the content can be a little bit academic, but again, it's a great place, and you'd be interested to see in terms of networking who pops up there.
Right. Yeah, no, that's good. That's good information for all of our listeners too, because not just our students that are about to get into the real world, as we call it, but the people listening that have maybe wanted to expand and grow and learn more, because it's an ever learning, ever changing industry that we always need to continuously stay on top of, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And one last thing, because you've just jogged my memory. So I have three. I have one current student in college and two that have graduated.
Right.
All three of my kids, two of my three kids went through. They stayed kind of in like an advertising communications track. And the reason why I think that wound up being good for all of them, and including my daughter who's now in college, is that that's kind of the nexus where creative and analytics come together, just like in a marketing position. Mm-hmm. And sometimes working in those agencies, even as an intern, it helps give you a spatial view of something, whether it's a campaign or whether it's a particular topic, or whether it's a particular brand or product. And because it tends to be real world, it also tends to be a lot of, hand-to-hand and day-to-day learning. So from that standpoint, even if you're a finance major, it oftentimes is good to go into an environment like an agency, mm-hmm. Just even for a couple months, just because you get to see a much different. You get to see how business is done in a communications way, which ultimately is going to lead to hopefully financial right. prosperity. So.
Oh my goodness. Well, Peter, thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdoms today. How can people reach you if they are interested in learning more from you?
They can reach me on LinkedIn at Pete Shafer, Peteshafer. Certainly, they can text me at 202-236-4522, or they can email me at peter@everestcomms.com.
Okay. Well, thank you, Peter, again. And thank you for your time today.
Oh, my pleasure, Ray. It was a lot of fun talking to you. Thank you so much for the great questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those of you listening, the best thing that you can do for Peter and I is to share this with those who need to listen to what he had to say today, and subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already. And then the very best thing that you can do is give us a review, because that's like gold to podcasters. So thank you so much. Yeah. And until next time, everybody, enjoy your marketing journey.
Thanks for listening to the Marketing Expedition podcast. Want to continue the journey? Don't miss out on new episodes. Subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you get your podcasts. Wouldn't it be great if there was one place you can go to get all the latest information and tips about marketing and advertising? The Marketing Expedition community is that place. People like you gather in our online community to build relationships with others and find the latest marketing trends, tactics, tools, and technology. We help you build your brand and your bottom line. Start your adventure today. Visit themarketingexpedition.com to find out more.